Debrief your team to identify the best practices to share with the entire group. Debrief your team to identify the mistakes that are being made so that you can eradicate those mistakes. What does that look like? Well, success in sales debriefs means you're effectively capturing, and then there's an important part, you're transferring those lessons learned. You're not just hoarding them to yourself, you're giving them away to create a continuous learning, improvement, and best perpetual pipeline. So here's one of the common challenges to a sales team debrief. We're talking to the senior vice president of business ops at an enormous company, and I'd identified something he was doing really well. And I said, hey, this is great. You need to share this with the entire group. He said, Thor, we're in competition with one another. Why would I share my best practices? Wrong answer. I was a fighter pilot. There's no more competitive group in the world than fighter pilots. But you know the first thing I did when I found out a new technique or something that I knew that made me more capable in the sky? I shared it with everybody on the team because I wanted to make sure that they were as capable as possible so we had the best team and the best business as possible. And that's because our leaders ingrained in us the fact that if the entire team doesn't succeed, we don't succeed as individuals. And we're constantly fighting to do well enough to go to Top Gun or get the next great assignment or get the next rank. But at the same time, I cared more about the team improving than my own individual improvement. And it's not because we're just selfless people. It's because that's a culture that was created within our organization. Another quote that we heard was, debrief? We don't debrief. That's from everyone in every sales organization. I've never talked to a sales organization that says, yep, after every sale, good or bad, we do a debrief, we identify the root cause, we leverage the new best practice, I teach the new team members how to use this new technique, or we eradicate this mistake. And you may be thinking of one time that you debrief, but I challenge you and I say that the time you're thinking of is probably a train wreck, right? In other words, somebody's job was on the line, and now we're figuring out how did we end up in a place where we lost that big deal, that huge $20 million opportunity isn't here anymore, and the boss wants answers. And so finally, we're doing a debrief so that we can make sure the finger's pointed in the right direction when the dust settles. That's not a real debrief, folks, and that's certainly not the culture I want to be a part of. I want to figure out how to scale and leverage best practices to improve the entire group. And sure, eradicate mistakes too, but I don't wait until a train wreck occurs to start the first debrief. So here's a slide that I've showed in the past that says how well organizations plan, brief, execute, debrief. Where does this come from? Well, Afterburner's been around for 20 years now. We've helped out more than 3,000 companies, and we've helped out more than 1.5 million people at those companies. Every industry you can think of, every continent on Earth, I guess besides Antarctica. And the most significant thing that comes out of these sessions is that debriefing is always the lowest rank. In other words, these folks say, we're terrible at debriefing. On a scale of 1 to 10, about a 3.5 to 4 is how well we debrief. And if you're seeing that and thinking, well, the pressure's off, I don't debrief well either, I guess the rest of the market doesn't, I challenge you because that number's on the rise. If you were to ask me this question 2 years ago, if you were to see this slide 2 years ago, it would have been about 2.5. That's because the smart companies, the right companies, the ones who are doing it well, are debriefing. They're creating more agile environments all across the organization. So people are seeing the value in debriefing and what it can bring to the table. What can it bring your team? Well, this is a great meta-analysis that was conducted with over 40 Harvard Business Review studies and shows that from looking at NFL teams, other elite military teams, and business teams, where they would debrief and figure out how much better the team would be afterwards and how much greater chance of success that they had. And here's the great information. If they just did an unstructured debrief, even they said, what should we continue doing, stop doing, or start doing, their chances of success at the next mission, the next sale, the next quarter rose by 22%, just by an unstructured debriefing. Now we structure that debriefing, and you use Afterburner's methodology, the methodology that was determined by fighter pilots and written in blood because it was for our survival that we had to develop it. Now that structured debriefing increases your chances of success up to 38%. You bring in a third-party facilitator and ensure you're having that person facilitate the conversation is going up an additional 27%. So we're seeing that the debrief can really take your organization to new levels. Here are the keys to the debrief. Number one, start with a win. We talked about it already. Don't debrief the train wreck. Don't tell me about the thing that went terribly. Start with a win. We did this last week, like I said, with the sales team that was doing fantastic. You think it was hard for them to debrief? You think they had to overcome a culture of sharing their best practices? Of course not. They're excited to. I mean, we're talking about how great they are. So very happily, this team said all the things that they were doing well and all the things they had changed to be more effective. That's a lot easier conversation to have. That's a lot easier first debrief than talking about something that didn't go well. Next up, if you're in an organization like the one I described earlier where the senior vice president said, hey, we're all competitors, I'm not going to help you out, and I'm here to win. Well, start off the culture the right way. Share your lessons learned. And you're saying, yeah, but Thor, I'm not giving it away. If I'm in the culture that's dog eat dog and we're all fighting and it's cutthroat, why would I share my best practices? That's the best opportunity because now you're going to show that A, you're selfless, B, you can scale success. It's not just about your own individual success. You can show others how to succeed as well, which is really what leadership is about. You can make yourself competitive for those leadership positions. And then C, you're increasing the performance of the team and showing the team a new way to exist. And the last thing I tell you for your debrief, make the application of those new techniques simple as possible. And you can't just say, hey, my lesson learned was we got to communicate better or we got to be more organized as a sales team. Everybody knows that. I'm talking about very specific checklist style lessons learned that you can share with the entire group. And this is not 5 pages long. Just keep it down to 5 items. We shared lessons learned with a sales team yesterday responsible for about $1.5 billion of sales annually for this group. And the lessons learned we shared was a 5-item checklist. But the people that saw it said, hey, that's going to help me immediately. It was simple. It was intuitive. It was something that a lot of folks weren't doing. We're able to very quickly change behaviors for the entire team.